game strong. You have to keep your opponent on its toes. And on the left, we have Simone Sanvito, 2018 World's Top 16, 2018 the EUIC champion, in 2017 the Malmo Regional Top 4, 2017 the Dortmund Regional finalist. And for Andrea Piasso, we have 2023 the EUIC Day 2, and in 2019 the EUIC Top 32. Both players that have come here to win it all.
Yeah, and both players got some amazing accomplishments already. You know, you can see here Andrea got very recent successes in the EUIC Day 2 race there, and Simone goes without saying, you know, previous European international champion, a massive accolade for him in there, but going to make for a great match going in. The top two players in this tournament currently going up against each other. Can Simone stop that undefeated record is the question, or can Andrea continuing on for the rest of this tournament?
Well, Simone also bringing the nice little mascot there with the Mudkip, of course, one of those Pokemon that you like to see, repeating its name every time, again and again. But I really like Simone's team because I've been playing myself a bit like the, more of this new balance with the Chiyu, Amoonguss, Gyarados, Fire, Water Core. I tend to not play Tinglu, I tend to play Excalibur in that regard. But it is one of those teams that's just working very well right now, where you have all this bulk to go around and the possibility of this Chiyu just to be able to set up, sit there while other Pokemon are redirecting attacks, or any possible sort of like other Pokemon really threatening it as well. As we have the Flutter Mane here, one of those things as well that I want to mention is the Substitute. That is one of those moves that's so important as well for Flutter Mane, where you can just make your opponent second guess. Do I have to double into that Flutter Mane because of its speed, or will that Flutter Mane now protect, making it so that the other Pokemon is free to do whatever it wants?
Yeah, and I think the other item choice on the Flutter Mane is quite interesting, is that booster energy. You don't generally see that too much, but it does give the Flutter Mane a little bit more of an offensive presence. And like you say, with that substitute, it makes your opponent kind of have to recognize that that is something you have to prioritize in this match. You can't allow it to get the substitute up for free, because it is one of those Pokemon, especially when it's combined with that Chiyu, it's going to be hitting very, very hard, especially with that Fairy Terra typing that it does offer to further boost its damage output. But like you say, a very nicely balanced team, with the Gyarados offering that Intimidate, so a way to slow down those physical threats on Andrea's side of the field, and the Tinglu as well to kind of support from especially defensive side of things. So we move over to Andrea's team and we can have a look. He has got the Dragonite, the Glamora, Shenpao, Tinglu, Tatsugiri, and the Dondozo.
Yeah, this is a team that we all have seen once or twice, where we know if that Glamora is a lead, it tries to poison you as much as possible. So a bit harder for all of these bulkier teams to deal with, because that turn-lead damage that you keep getting as well, it's not something you like to see. But with that turn-lead damage, the offensive Pokemon in the back, like for example Tatsugiri, Dondozo, just being able to clean up with the little residual damage that the Pokemon get with thanks to that Glamora.
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing. I think you pointed out just now when we took an overview of Simone's team, was the fact that he's got these really good defensive options in his team to slow the game down and kind of dictate how the play goes for him. But as Andrea's got access to that Glamora, it kind of really nullifies the ability to slow the game down, because as soon as you are poisoned, you're on a timer. You have to get moving with what you're doing, because otherwise the Glamora is going to be able to affect the game in ways that you can't really control. The timer toxic ticking down is going to be there. You've got nice options as well with the Tinglu on Andrea's side of the field. A very good defensive Pokemon, a way to slow the game down even further for you to support that poison. And you've got the Dondozo as well, so when that comes onto the field, you know, you're going to get those boosts, especially if you combine it with that Tatsugiri, and you're going to be able to sit there for a little period of time, at least for those kind of poison
we're
ticks
just
to kind
enjoying
of,
right now. The thing that we like to see as well, Yon Dondozo together with Stealth Rock Tinglu. Stealth Rock, a move that isn't commonly used, but these days you have toxic spikes as well, you have regular spikes, you have a lot of hazards that help every time a Pokemon switches in. So trying to make sure that those bulkier teams tend to switch a lot as well with the Intimidate cycling, and for example any Pollen Puffing with the Amoonguss as well, trying to make sure that the damage will still be there when you switch in and out. Like Amoonguss with the regenerator just still have a bit of that chip damage.
Yeah, these field effects are really going to be impactful in this match. It really limits your ability to switch around as well. You know, I think the one thing that you can do against the Dondozo is reposition pretty well in most scenarios. But if you're contending with Stealth Rock, if you're contending with Toxic Spikes, it makes it very difficult, and then you're limited to how much you could switch around, because if you're out on the field when that Toxic Debris gets activated, then I don't really want to switch about too much, because if I do, I'm going to end up poisoning things, and especially if the Stealth Rock kind of on top of that, combines on top of that, you're looking at taking even more damage. But as we see, the players are setting up, get involved at home and get your votes in. The votes are very close for Andrea, just sneaking it at the minute, but is it going to stay like that by the end of this voting period?
Very close. Though I feel like we can say this is a dead 50-50. The players, the viewers agree at home as well. And Dondozo, like as you said, like Toxic Spike, Stealth Rock, Dondozo also being one of those Pokemon that has Yawn, which is a move that puts you to sleep the next turn. But it is one of those things where the simple option is just switch.
Yeah.
But then you have those Stealth Rocks, you have the Toxic Spikes, so you're forcing your opponent to keep switching while they're, which would normally you would love to do if you're in bad position, but when there's so many hazards there, it's kind of hard to keep doing that.
I think it's one of those things, the Yawn is in particular, we'll get to it probably in between matches, we'll come back to that, but like you see, you make some really good points as we get into this match. Andrea leading off with that Tinglu and the Glamora, and Simone leading off with his Gyarados and the Amoonguss.
Yeah, Gyarados, kind of liking his position. It is a rather bulky Pokemon. It has a special defense, Intimidate, making sure that Tinglu does do a little bit of less damage. But Tinglu is able to set up now Stealth Rocks, and if it's able to set up Stealth Rocks, you still have that Power Gem to think of as well. But Gyarados making sure that no Stealth Rocks are put down with the Taunt, making sure that no Stealth Rocks are being put, and the Mortar Spill just to poison that Gyarados and putting that on the timer as well.
Yeah, and a big turn here with preventing the Tinglu from setting up the Taunt from itself, actually stopping, going for that Taunt into the Amoonguss, not able to do that. Really nice play from Simone to prevent that, so it allows the Amoonguss to get that Spore out into the Glamora here. It is holding the Assault Vest, so will be susceptible to going to sleep, and it isn't going to be as useful. It's not going to be able to threaten the Gyarados. Gyarados normally threatened by that Power Gem, the Rock type attack there, but now in a bit of a safer position. It is poisoned, but it is going to be able to stay on the field and disrupt.
Yeah, it's also the nice thing of having Amoonguss on the field or just in your party with, because even if you put down Toxic Spikes, if the Amoonguss switches in as a poison type, it removes any sort of Toxic Spikes as well. And it has the Pollen Puff to keep your partner Pokemon, try and keep it as healthy as possible. As the Iron Hands is switched in, Glamora still asleep, taking its mandatory turn of sleep, and the Ruination having the HP of that Amoonguss as well.
Yeah, and you can see that it will activate that Citrus Berry on the Amoonguss here, and just give it a little bit of health back to put it in a bit of a better position as the Spore comes out into that Tinglu and putting it to sleep. So everything on Andrea's side of the field sleeping at the moment. Sanvito, Simone getting that Iron Hands onto the field though in a position where it is going to start setting up and doing some damage like it wants to, having to avoid activating the Toxic Debris on that Glamora though. But like you say, you do have the Amoonguss to kind of get rid of those Toxic Spikes throughout the match if you can reposition it. The Ruination, and you know, I think maybe if that went into the Gyarados, because the Amoonguss has got that regenerator ability, so you can kind of undo the damage that you've done there. But you are in a position, if you are Simone now, to really start making an impact, and we are seeing that with a Swords Dance from this Iron Hands. Yeah,
this Iron Hands not wanting to deal with this bit of a slower game. The sleep very nice right now with the Glamora and the Tinglu both asleep, meaning this Iron Hands just being able to freely go off it. Tinglu did shake off the taunt right there, meaning it can go for a possible taunt itself to make sure that the Amoonguss doesn't go for any sort of Spore anymore or any Rage Powders, but it can also go for that possibility of that Stealth Rock. We have the switch into the Gyarados, another Intimidate into this Tinglu, making sure that the Earthquake will do less damage as well, that the Tinglu does carry here. And the Glimora still asleep, unfortunately, still deciding to take that little nap there. Dream Punch coming out in Glimora, not KOing it, but doing quite a bit of damage. And the Toxic Spikes are now being put up thanks to that Toxic Debris ability. And you have the Amoonguss in the back, being able to switch in for those Toxic Spikes as Tinglu goes into the Gyarados. But I don't feel like Gyarados minds this very much right now, because it is still able to go for any sort of waterfall right now on either of these two.
Yeah, the big problem about being taunted on the Gyarados in particular is the fact that it can't stop the Tinglu now setting up the stealth rocks, and you don't have a way to remove that if you're Simone. You know, you don't have access to rapid spin, which you would normally see the way to remove that from the field. So once that is set up, it does make it a little bit more difficult. Not seeing it though for the Gyarados to switch in and out, but we're seeing the Tinglu just switch out, kept for later from Andrea's side of the field, and that Dragonite hit the field, probably to help deal with that big threat in the Iron Hands that is on the field. Sword Stance boosted from Simone's side, as we see a waterfall into the Glimora, pick up the knockout there, and more Toxic Spikes hit the field.
Yeah, this Iron Hands now being able to move here, going for the Dream Punch. A good switch to the Dragonite, of course resisting its thanks to its flying typing right now. So we know what the bruisers kind of are in the back for Andrea, which is probably that Chimpao next to that Dragonite. Being able to deal a lot of damage, of course, thanks to that Sword of Ruin, lowering the defenses of all Pokemon on the field. Gyarados is in, so that means it can't go for an Intimidate cycle either, because this Dragon is multi-scale, but it is also choice band, and a very it's looking very strong right now. Yeah,
especially with that Shen Pao support, you think it probably will be able to, especially if it locks into Outrage, it's going to be able to knock out anything on Simone's side of the field. You know, I think both Pokemon are probably going to be at risk of getting knocked out here. Even that Iron Hands that is set up and putting on a lot of pressure with that Sword Stance boost that it's got, but it is in a little bit of an awkward position. You do have the Amoonguss, of course, that you can bring in from the back. Might be able to soak up some of the options a little bit better, but again, the Gyarados switching out here wants to try and get an Intimidate onto the field as soon as possible, which is understandable against both of these big physical threats.
Yeah, and the Toxic Spikes disappear, and the Glimora is already down, so meaning right now no more Toxic Spikes on the field. The text coming out, Ice Spinner going into the Amoonguss. It is enough for the KO there. Amoonguss just going down. Most of the time you see Amoonguss survive these crazy amount of super effective hits, but not this time around. This Ice Spinner was strong and ready to go, as now we see that the Dragonite is locked into Outrage. A very strong move with the Choice Band. And there's a Chimpao on the field. This is still bound to hurt, even though this Dragonite is now intimidated.
Yeah, it is intimidated, but it's still going to be doing a heck of a lot of damage because of that Choice Band there, boosting the attack stat even further. But the one thing that you would say that Simone has access to is that Flutterman in the back. It can switch in, and if it does come in on the right target, obviously Outrage can target, it's random which slot it goes into. If you get that slot right with the switch in for the Fluttermane, then you can get yourself into a nice position where you can potentially remove the Dragonite the next turn. The multi-scale has been broken. You've just got to worry about that Shen Pao, which does threaten any of the Fluttermane coming in. You know, if the slot is wrong with getting the Fluttermane onto the field, then you can get punished for that. So Andrea in a bit of a commanding position here, but he's got to get this Outrage slot right.
We have the Ice Spinner into the Iron Hands, not doing that much damage thanks to that Intimidate. But now Thunder Wave with the Dragonite. Is Dragonite still able to move? This is quite a fast fast Gyarados, as the Dream Punch comes out into that Chimpao, putting it on its Focus Sash. Only 1 HP remaining, but that's sometimes all it needs right now. Being able to heal all the damage that the Chimpao just did to it, meaning this Dragonite will now go for that strong Outrage. It is into that Gyarados. Is this enough? It is enough. No more Intimidate cycling from that end, but taking a bit of rocky helmet damage, breaking the multi-scale as well.
Yeah, huge turn here to get rid of the Gyarados, but it does open the door for this Fluttermane to enter the field now, and like we said, put that pressure on both the Shen Pao and the Dragonite. It does have access to the Fairy Terra typing, I believe, and it has got the booster energy as well that we've just seen activated. So in a position now to really put away the Dragonite, which is being paralyzed. It's not going to be moving first. It's locked into Outrage. So not the most preferable move choice here. And the Iron Hands next to it doing a good job. But the Shen Pao going first. It is the Ice Spinner. Not enough to pick up the knockout onto this Fluttermane as it returns with a huge knockout into that Dragonite.
Yeah, exactly. A strong Moonblast into that Dragonite. Of course, super effective there. The Ice Spinner not killing the Fluttermane quite big as the Wild Charge coming out from The Iron Hands just trying to make sure that the Chi Power didn't go for any sort of Terra Ghost, so that its Drain Punch will just not hit at all. Meaning, Andrea only has one Pokemon left. It is that Ting-Lu, and Ting-Lu has done some amazing things in this season already, but I'm quite afraid if it is able to do anything against a +2 Iron Hands and a Flutter Mane with that booster energy.
Yeah, and I think that's the big question here. You know, if it had maybe that Poison Terra type, you would say it probably has a decent chance to kind of come back in this match. But unfortunately for Andrea, it has got the Water Terra typing, which probably isn't the most optimal kind of Terra choice against these particular Pokemon. It's going to be weak to the Iron Hands to begin with. It's already boosted up with that Sword Stance, so it's going to take a lot of damage from that Pokemon. And we are just going to see the Flutter Mane protect as we go into this next turn.
Yeah, the Terra on the Ting-Lu, trying to make sure that Drain Punch not doing that much damage, but the critical hit says no. Quite a bit of damage there. Now Ting-Lu is able to move freely. There we go. And with trying to get a little bit of damage back again. He eating at Citrus Berry. Earthquake coming out. Of course, this is a spread move. It is super effective on the Iron Hands as the Floodman did protect there, meaning we can see how much this does, and it's not even doing over half right now. So this Ting-Lu not looking in a great position right now.
Not brilliant. And you would have maybe said, oh, well, if you could have put up the knockout on that Flutter Mane here, you'd single target Earthquake the next turn, maybe you could do it. But we are just seeing the Wild Charge come out after that substitute. Simone convincingly taking this game 1 in this round 12 match.
Okay, that is indeed quite convincingly. Like the earlier with the Glimora trying to poison everything, only really poisoning the Dragonite and that's all. That Moongus really proving to put away the toxic debris, making sure that all those toxic spikes are gone. Then the possibility of just not being poisoned itself, like you have. Amoonguss is one of those Pokemon you really have to play around with because you have that threat of Spore as well. So it's quite scary to have. But now, what would you do if you're Andrea to adapt? Because that Iron Hands looking quite good against this team right now.
Yeah, I think it was really the lead from Simone where he was leading with the Gyarados and that Amoonguss. He knew that the way for Andrea to shut down the Amoonguss was through that Ting-Lu, but saying, well, yeah, if you bring the Ting-Lu to shut down my Amoonguss, I'm just going to shut you down before you're able to shut me down with the taunt, taunting it first and allowing the Amoonguss to put the Glimora to sleep, so it wasn't really able to get any momentum after that point, and then putting the Ting-Lu to sleep whilst also getting in the Iron Hands, which I think is the big key to probably unlocking a lot of the issues that Andrea's team doesn't want to deal with. Getting the Sword Stance up, utilizing those sleep turns, and then really making the most out of that Iron Hands to really cut through everything on Andrea's side of the field. The Dragonite coming onto the field had the multi-scale broke. When it did switch in, not really the most optimal thing to have happen to the Dragonite. You want it to come onto the field with that multi-scale intact so it is able to kind of get a bit more momentum, I guess, and more use out of it when it does hit the field, but making it more difficult. It did get paralyzed after that from the Gyarados. So Simone really utilizing all of these unique supporting tools that he's got in his team and then allowing that Iron Hands to be kind of the star of the show to make it difficult. Whether or not we see Andrea kind of adjust his game plan going into this next one, I think maybe don't allow yourself to get kind of disrupted by that Amoonguss so much, because I think that the sleep from the Amoonguss was the one thing that really made it quite difficult in that last match.
Exactly, as we have the same leads from game 1, meaning we are definitely bound to see some other plays being done here, because you have to deal with this Amoonguss somehow. You can taunt with Ting-Lu, but unfortunately, the Gyarados can taunt the Ting-Lu as well, and you are slower than this Gyarados because this Gyarados seems to be really fast because it's been outspeeding Pokemon left and right, like the Dragonite, like the Glimora as well. So you have to start making a game plan against this Gyarados and this Amoonguss at the same time, really. Yeah,
and I think we're going to start off with a terrestrialization here. I think from that game 1 where we said the Ruination going into the Amoonguss probably wasn't the best call from Andrea's end. I think if you concentrate down onto the Gyarados here, because it has to go for that taunt, it does open the door for you to remove it potentially with a double up onto the field. We do see the taunt from the Gyarados into that Ting-Lu. This is going to prevent it from going for any taunts on itself, from itself, as we see a Mortal Spin come out from the Glimora. Going to pick up the poison on the Gyarados. The Amoonguss immune to that because of its poison typing, and the Ting Lu now going to be able to get an attack off. Where does it choose to go? But it actually goes for the taunt. It is locked down and opening the door for that Amoonguss to get that Spore off into the Ting Lu this time. But the change up this time for Andreas, he has terrestrialized into that Grass Terra type on the Glamora, going to be immune to the Spores in this next turn. So going to be able to get a bit more out of that Glamora this time around.
Yeah, it's still an interesting play because you now have a Pokemon that is immune to Spore. You have a Pokemon that's now immune to any Rage Powders, meaning you do have that slot to possibly attack with any kind of Power Gems, for example, to be super effective on Gyarados. And Simone might be seeing this as well and switching into the Fluttermane. Fluttermane, of course, a bit bulkier on the special defense side, being able to take anything there. And especially with that Ting Lu on the field, we actually see the Energy Ball boost a bit that Terra. Doing some respectable damage to this Fluttermane right now, but you're still in a position where now the Fluttermane is able to just go for any really substitutes. The Pollen Puff going into Glamora doing also not that much of damage, but it's thanks to that Ting Lu on the field, lowering all the special attack of all these Pokemon on the field. It's just really, and Ting Lu meanwhile just still taking its nap.
Yeah, and we are going to see the Fluttermane enter the field. Like you said, he's going to go for the substitute here. So while he's got the opportunity, set that substitute up in front of the sleeping Ting Lu. And the one thing that you would say about the Glamora is because of that big special defense on the Fluttermane, it is able to take these boosted energy balls pretty comfortably. And the fact that it doesn't have access to Sludge Bomb makes it a little bit easier for this Fluttermane to come onto the field and put a bit forward, a bit more offensive pressure here. We are going to see Ting Lu stay asleep this turn and a Pollen Puff come out from that Amoonguss. Trusty old Amoonguss topping up that HP on the Fluttermane, putting it in a much more comfortable position going into this next turn as that taunt wears off on the Ting Lu. So once it does wake up, it will be able to potentially shut down that Amoonguss before it utilizes any more of those annoying spores on his side of the field.
Yeah, as we now in this turn, we have seen that Pollen Puff healing from last turn working quite well as we have the Energy Ball into that Protect, making sure that this Fluttermane not really being hit. Ting Lu finally having the option to wake up, going for that taunt, making sure that there's a Amoonguss if it does anything, not go for Spore yet again. Actually just going for that Pollen Puff just for that little bit more of damage onto the Glamora. Glamora is still that Assault Vest set, meaning its special defense is still raised quite a bit, but Amoonguss still hitting it super effectively with this Pollen Puff. Now, if Ting Lu was able to wake up last turn and go for example, for an Earthquake, it would have been interesting to see possibly the Glamora still putting up its Toxic Debris, and you might have gotten the KO, possible KO onto the Fluttermane as well, because it was already quite low after that substitute. You move faster than the Amoonguss, so now you have to start playing around this. Moonblast into Glamora, not enough. Mortal Spin going into that Fluttermane, now putting it on a timer, not being able to give it a reliable way to just keep subbing up as well.
I really like the option that you mentioned, and we do see that Earthquake that you were talking about come out to activate the Mortal Spin. Glamora hanging just barely on as that does go out, and the Pollen Puff coming out from the Amoonguss going to top up the HP of that Fluttermane, just keeping it healthy, but it is poisoned now, and the big thing is the Toxic Debris on the field now, and the Amoonguss is out on the field. So it does open the door for Andrea to maybe start taking advantage of that slot, because you know if you want to get rid of the Toxic Spice, you're going to have to switch the Amoonguss out. We already know one Pokemon that's in the back, it's the Gyarados, and the other one is likely to be the Iron Hands. So potentially you can go after that slot if you do suspect a switch. But we are going to just see a Moonblast from the Fluttermane picking up the knockout onto that Glamora, finally going down after all of the work that it's put in.
Damage, yeah. Ting Lu just going for the Ruination, doing a bit more damage to this Fluttermane, putting it at half. While the move is just making sure, no, you know what, keep that healthy. Like, all right, you have the poison, but like I'm willing to keep this as healthy as possible. Glamora surviving that one turn gave still the option of that Fluttermane having to go for that Glamora as well, because it was able to survive, because you do not want a double up from both the Ting Lu and the Glamora onto this Fluttermane.
No, and now we do see the Shen Pao hit the field. It is going to threaten the Fluttermane and the Amoonguss pretty heavily with its offensive attacks, but we do know that Intimidate on the Gyarados is in the back, probably likely to come in for Simone to just reduce the attack power on both of these physical threats on Andrea's side of the field. So the Amoonguss, now the taunt has worn off, so will be able to fire off a Spore if it wants to. Has to be wary about that Ice Spinner that could potentially come out from that Shen Pao, but probably got enough health to be able to take that. Not really wanting to entertain that option though, as it goes back and the Gyarados enters the field to get off that all-important Intimidate, reducing the attack stat on the Shen Pao and the Tinglu by 1 stage.
Yeah, and we seen this time around Fluttermane moving first. Last time it was the Chien Pao that moved first, meaning these Pokemon are probably speed tying right now. Focus Sash still hanging on. Ice Spinner going into that Fluttermane. Let's see if this is enough. It is not enough to kill it right now, but it is enough thanks to that poison damage. Taunt going into Gyarados, making sure that that Tinglu can keep taunting if the Amoonguss comes back in onto that Gyarados slot just as well.
Yeah, it's a really nice turn here for Andrea. Like you say, getting that taunt onto the Gyarados, really imperative, especially if the Amoonguss comes back onto the field now. You're going to be able to taunt that before the Gyarados essentially taunts you to stop your taunt onto the Amoonguss. So it really helps you kind of make sure that Amoonguss isn't as disruptive as it can be. Obviously, the Toxic Spikes have now been taken away. The Amoonguss coming onto the field, suiting Simone perfectly here for that Iron Hands that is in the back that potentially can come in. And the Shen Pao now down to its Sash as well, in a little bit of an awkward position where even a Pollen Puff from this Amoonguss will be enough to pick it up. And we are seeing it actually retreat now. Doesn't want to entertain getting taken down. And the Dragonite entering the field now for Andrea. And it will be a big, powerful attacking Pokemon that he can take advantage of going into these latter stages of this match.
Yeah, exactly. Having to switch, you had to switch the Amoonguss in there to remove the Toxic Spikes so this Iron Hands could try and do as much work as possible. Again, we have the Terra activation here onto that Amoonguss, going for that Terra Water type this time around. Good, very good defensive typing there. Making sure the switch from the Chien Pao into Dragonite, just making sure that you keep that Chien Pao for possibly later as the taunt comes out into that Amoonguss, making sure that no Spore or any Rage Powders will come out of this Amoonguss as it goes for the Pollen Puff, breaking the multi-scale onto the Dragonite, which is fairly nice, but that Dragonite still standing strong, quite strong here on this field.
Yeah, and I do like the terrestrialization here on the Amoonguss. It takes away that weakness to potentially something that the Dragonite could fire out. You know, if it does go for an aerial ace that it's got access to, at least then you're not really susceptible to that super effective damage, and nothing that Tinglu really threatens you super effective either. So it allows you a bit more room to kind of support the other members of your team. You can see that the Iron Hands is on the field now for Simone. I think he's got to try and get a Sword Stance off if he is able to. It would help him deal with the Dragonite on Andrea's side of the field. The terrestrialization has been used, so the Dragonite doesn't have an option to terrestrialize. It was used on the Glamora here. We are going to see a big outrage from that Dragonite into the Iron Hands, but taking it pretty well as a Sword Stance is set up, and it is leaving the door open for this Tinglu to fire off a Ruination into this slot, but not enough to pick up the knockout. And the Amoonguss, trusty Amoonguss, coming back, healing up all of that damage done to the Iron Hands and putting it in a bit more of a comfortable position with that Sword Stance now under its belt.
That's the thing. If you are predicting the Gyarados to switch in, you just go for that strong outrage right now. We saw it do so much to the Iron Hands. It is up to the game to decide what target it will be going for. If I feel personally, the Amoonguss has to go right now because it can't keep healing with these Pollen Puffs, and we already have seen that the Earthquake from the Gyarados, from the Tinglu is not doing enough to this Iron Hands. We now have the Chien Pao being switched in instead of that Tinglu, just making sure that all the defense stats of all the Pokemon onto the field are dropped because that Gyarados is coming back in, meaning Intimidate on deck for this Dragonite and the Chien Pao. It is Intimidated, but it is still that Choice Band next to Chien Pao as well. Outrage coming out. It is into that Iron Hand slot. Is it enough?
Oh,
it's not enough. It's still not enough. Wild Charge coming out into the Dragonite. And that is enough for the kill onto the Dragonite. Now it will faint because of recoil damage, meaning you now have only Gyarados and the Amoonguss on Simone's side. And on the other end, you have Chien Pao still with that Tinglu as well. you have to now start really thinking, what is the final play here to make? Because that Gyarados is looking rather nice because, of course, Qing Pao is on that 1 HP. Tinglu is still a ground type. And Amoonguss with the Pollen Pus is still there to heal anything that this Gyarados, any damage that this Gyarados is taking as well.
Yeah, the Shen Pao in a really not the best of positions, down on his sash. It is going to be able to get an attack off here into one of these targets, but it is intimidated, so it's not going to be hitting as hard. Andrea not in the best of positions, does have a healthy Ting Lu, but can be shut down by that taunt to prevent it doing any sort of supporting options, shutting down the Amoonguss. But like you say, I think the big thing is the Pollen Puff on the Amoonguss here. Can keep that Gyarados in a healthy position, isn't weak to that Ice Spinner anymore, which makes it a big problem for Andrea. Simone playing this perfectly going into this last turn, and really that survival with the Iron Hand so big. We are seeing the Sacred Sword come out from the Shen Pao, the waterfall into the Shen Pao to knock it out, leaving the Tinglu as the only option for Andrea going into these last few turns.
Yep, now Tinglu on the field, what is it going for? It is going for that Ruination onto the Amoonguss. You have to get this Amoonguss down first. It is going to be able to have a little of a snack time, have a little berry, going back into green thanks to that Citrus Berry, but the Amoonguss is just able to heal up this Gyarados time and time again, and that's the issue. You have to kill this Amoonguss first, but it now being on the field next to Gyarados and no Pokemon next to the Tinglu, it's looking quite dire right now.
You're not going to be able to do that because Simone has the ability to taunt like we're going to see now, and then utilize that Spore, put the Tinglu to sleep, shut it down, stop any option of any offense, while it just allows you to utilize the Gyarados to its full potential and just whittle it down until Waterfall is enough to take it out. Massively done by Simone here, and it does look a very difficult job for Andrea to bring this match back from this point in time.
Yeah, playing extremely well around these toxic spikes, around Gyarados, of course, being levitated. Even though this Gyarados has been poisoned game 1 and game 2, the Amoonguss was always there to keep healing the Gyarados there from time and time again. Excellent. Like, Andrea, of course, had to like try and play around this because it was the Iron Hands that was really proving to be difficult to deal with. Surviving the outrage as well earlier was quite important, because if you were able to keep your Dragonite would have looked amazing right now with this Gyarados and this Amoonguss on the field.
Yeah, and I think the big plays there were, you know, you saw that turn where the outrage was coming out. You saw the Shen Pao come onto the field to, like you say, you mentioned at the time, it lowering the defenses of everything on the field, making that outrage even stronger. But to kind of combat that, you saw the Gyarados come out from Simone to make sure that the Intimidate was on the field, so that survival was possible, and such a crucial turn. And like we mentioned so many times throughout the broadcast this weekend, there is a fine balance to a lot of these matches and how they end up, the outcomes of these games, and that was definitely one of them. 6 HP, Iron Hands, surviving
that was,
just enough to pick up the knockout and get that revenge knockout with the Wild Charge.
It is truly the weekend of Iron Hands. We have seen so many Iron Hands, clutch survivors, clutch KOs and everything, showcasing again and again why it's one of these Pokemon that has been used quite a lot. Congratulations to Simone, ending Andrea's run of just going without losses right now, meaning Simone can now start getting all of these, going now at the record of 12-1, if I believe correctly. So doing very well for himself.
Doing amazingly well now, and like you say, unfortunately ending that undefeated run for Andrea, but you know, you've got to give all credit to Simone, because he did it in such a fashion. He had such a good game plan coming into this match and really stuck with it, and limited everything that Andrea was able to do in that match, utilizing the Iron Hands like he did, picking the perfect time to get the sword stance off in both game 1 and game 2, and then that clutch survival in that game 2 on 6 HP was enough to just push the game over the edge for him.
Iron Hands just being able to say, this is as far as the damage goes. Sorry, I have to attack now. Excuse me. Please let me. But that's just showcasing, because like earlier when I mentioned the previous game, like previous round, Simone was able to play against someone where the game was way slower, and here too, he was able to play a bit slower compared to Andrea's bit more team, where you also like against playing those slow game teams. But the Dragonite Chien-Pao being normally such offensive powerhouses, still being able to maneuver around it thanks to that Gyarados and Amoonguss. Gyarados and Amoonguss just showcasing again and again why it's been picking up in popularity, because you have the Intimidate, you have Waterfall, you have Taunt.
Yeah, there's so many different supportive options that you've got between the two Pokemon there that kind of fill lots of different roles that you need within this format to help the more offensive options to kind of excel and come to the forefront, so they're able to kind of execute the game plans like the way you want them to. The Amoonguss in particular, that the water terror typing in that match in particular, really, really good towards the end there. It took away that weakness to the Chien-Pao, really didn't really have to worry about that at all, and put it in a position where it was able to support that Gyarados perfectly. The amount of pollen puffs we saw throughout that match as well really put the emphasis on how good a supporting option it was for Simone, and how he was able to position it in really nice spots in the game next to things that really benefited from just having that HP topped up and in a position where they were kind of able to kind of like just get him over the line when he needed to.
Absolutely. It was hard to deal with Amoonguss. The Amoonguss, of course, being a bulky Pokemon, where in the previous round we have seen the double up from a Flutter Mane and a Great Tusk trying to kill that, but they both had to double up on it, which is, these are Pokemon that have amazing stats, amazing offensive value, and the Amoonguss is from time and time again, just proving that a lot of times it can deal with it. You have that Citrus Berry. Okay, you put me over half, but now I get the Citrus Berry, and now you don't kill me. We're cool.
Yeah, and then you've got the Regenerator on top of that. I think the biggest problem for Andrea throughout that match was normally you'd probably be able to stop the Amoonguss from doing most of the things that it does to disrupt your side of the field with that taunt, but the fact that you've got that taunt support from the Gyarados, to further kind of support the Amoonguss, to allow it the freedom that it needs to kind of do the things you want it to do, really made it difficult for Andrea to get a grip of the match. And I think that was the big kind of problem for him. We didn't see him really try any other options as well. We didn't see the Tatsuguri Dondozo as an option, and really relying and leaning on that Glamora, which in the game too definitely got a little bit more momentum than it got in that first game, where it was just initially put to sleep. It wasn't able to do anything, but I still think there was the opportunity in that first turn to really go after the damage as well. Well, go after the Gyarados, I think in particular, because you could have went for the Power Gem, Ruination, or Ruination that turn, terrestrialize into your grass, the next turn go, because you can't be redirected, you can't be put to sleep, but get that Gyarados to a point where it is a lot weaker and it is susceptible, so you can't have it as an option disrupting your side of the field. And with one of those items down, it's easy for me to sit here and say that, but it's a different angle to look at where the match could have went. When you're
playing the game, sometimes there's you're not always like spectating from a third position, of course, and in our regards, we would probably be Unga Bunga damage, where we just wanted a bit of that damage, because in the long game, Mortal Spin is something that can be amazing, especially if you are able to get those Stealth Rocks, if you are able to get those switches out with the Toxic Debris and stuff, making sure that the Pokemon can clean up, like the Dragonite, showcasing if that Iron Hands was poisoned from the beginning, had one turn of that poison damage, that Outrage would have done it there.
Yeah, it would have been enough, like you say, but I think the problem is the Gyarados again, being able to cycle in to support with that Intimidate, because that was so pivotal in that one moment. We've mentioned it a number of times already, but it is probably the big swing in how the end result
Gyarados
kind of
also
ended
been
up.
proving this weekend to be quite, well, he's here to stay, really.
I think so for the remainder of Regulation C. Like I say, it's got a lot of different options. It's got speed control in that Thunder Wave. It's got Taunt, help support, and keep things protected. It stops you disrupting my side of the field. And it's also got the Waterfall, which plays with that Thunder Wave. It's a really nice Pokemon. And on top of that, it's got Intimidate, it's got a Ground Immunity, it's Water typing, it has Terrestrialization as well. The list goes on and on and on. But Gyarados is a really strong Pokemon.
It's weird to see that Gyarados only this regulation really starting to pop off, while before also being able, I feel, because people were very afraid of Tinglu, that Gyarados suddenly have like, you know what, actually this is really not bad. And like Thunder Wave, you have even the possibility of Helping Hand, or even Icy Wind if you really want to. Like, you have these options, or my personal favorite, Whirlpool.
Yeah, I like the option there, trapping in your opponent as well. But I think the thing is, with that mortal spin, going back to that as well, it is a really good utility. But when you're not able to really get the other options like you want, like that, if he was able to get the stealth rock set up, I think then that like plays into that whole strategy a bit more. But the fact that the Gyarados was able to taunt the Tinglu, prevent the stealth rock, really limited the impact the mortal spin could have. But that is everything from us at the moment, because Simone is ready for a player interview on the couch with Ben. So we're going to throw it right over there, and we can get a few insights from Simone on that last round.
Yeah.
Thank you very much here, and as you said, I'm here with the winner from round 12, Simone Sanvito. And Simone, you just managed to defeat the player that has so far been undefeated in this tournament. How's that feeling for you?
Everybody meets their end at some point, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you've got to be ready to, play against anyone, right? You always, everyone is defeatable.
Yeah, except me.
Except
don't look at my record, please. Don't fact check that.
We'll ignore that one other game. It didn't really happen.
Yeah, I mean, didn't happen on camera today.
Exactly that. So yeah, Andrea was using a pretty interesting team that really we haven't seen too much in live competition, with the Stealth Rocks and the Mortal Spin and the Yawn on the Dondozo. Kind of seen it only in the global challenges. So what were your thought processes going into that particular matchup?
I've played against that matchup quite a few times on the online ladder, and I also knew about that team. Like, it's been known, I guess, not for tournaments play, but as you said, online play. Like, I've known about it, and so based on my experience on playing into that, if they can deny the spore with taunt, if they can set up Stealth Rock, if they can just set up their board position, they can pressure switches with Yawn, then you can kind of slow play, like win the damage trade into them quite easily. And Taunt Gyarados is amazing into that.
You really used it very, very well. I think every time Gyarados was on the field in the early game, it was straight with a taunt.
Yeah, because I didn't want both the Stealth Rocks, because Gyarados being a flying type means it takes 25 upon switching in. Also, yeah, to deny taunt, so I could spore his stuff. Obviously, like, he could Terra his Glimmora into grass, but that's a very big commitment. On game 1, I made the read about him not tearing, and I was like, even if he tears, it's whatever. But if he doesn't, I'm quite ahead. I'm already quite ahead. In game 2, I realized, well, he lost because of that, so now he will tear. I can't deny the Mortal Spin. Glimmora has to do something this turn, and after it Mortal Spins me, it doesn't do anything much after. So I can spore the Tinglu turn 1, even if it doesn't tear, even if it's sporeable technically. It's not a big deal, because after it Mortal Spins me, it can't do anything of value.
Exactly, and that's something that's really interesting to hear, and for everyone back home, something to pay attention to. You're talking about the match and the situations that you have, and it doesn't really matter what your opponent's doing. You're just playing kind of the best turn and seeing what happens, and then playing from there. Really, really important for everyone at home. So the other Pokemon, other than Gyarados, that worked really well for you in that match was that Iron Hands, and in game 1 it got the sword stance up and managed to run away with the game.
Yeah.
How important has that Pokemon been for you throughout the tournament?
It carried me, like, hard. I was talking to my friends, and my least 2 Brotmon in the tournaments are by probably Fluttermane, maybe Chi-Yu, I'm not sure, but those 2 are by far the least Brotmons in games. I've always used Iron Hands with Sword Dance, with Among Us. Also, fun fact, before this tournament, I was unsure on which set to run on Iron Hands. I was fighting, is that a word? I was in debate between Terrafire Swordsdance or AV with Terragrass. I liked AV more because I'm more of a fake out, ball switch kind of player than a Swordsdance than win the game kind of player. But the problem I've had with Terragrass is they can force the Terra really easily, with Flutter Mane being the most used Pokemon by quite a lot.
Yeah.
They can force the Terra very easily, and then they can like grass type is abusable by their Arcanine, their Chiyu,
Yeah.
and also the teams got like furrowed by Will-O-Wisp, and I need something against that. And Terrafire also means I'm immune to Will-O-Wisp. So the team, but with this change, I go from struggling into Arcanine, Among Us, Flutter Mane, into that being somewhat of a positive matchup. I mean, very positive.
Very
but
much so.
Flutter Mane is always can always do stuff.
Definitely, and that's why players do opt to use it. And the last thing before we wrap this up and go into our next match from round 12, you were at just around 200 points before going in. This performance this weekend has definitely locked you in for a day one invite to the World Championships. Now, what are your plans for Japan?
I want to go because I like this game, I like this format, so I'll try my best to be there. Flights are that price, that's something to keep in mind, but I will try my hardest.
Oh, well, we hope to see you there very much so.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time and your insights.
Thank you for your interview.
Absolutely, you are very, very welcome, and I hope everyone at home has taken a lot of value from such an experienced player and his insights into his team. We're going to be going to a short break now, but we'll be back with a second match from round 12 of the Turin special event, so stay tuned.